Ecclesiastes 10:11 says, the serpent may bite when it is not charmed. The babbler is no different. The words of a wise man's mouth are gracious, but the lips of a fool shall swallow him up. The words of his mouth begin with foolishness, and the end of his talking is raving madness. So fools can't control their mouth, and that's Nabal. He can't control his mouth. He says what comes to his mind. This is how he got the nickname. So if you guys would turn there in your Bibles to 1 Samuel 25. Now, you're going to read the title of this message and go, this doesn't sound like a very positive message. The picture of a fool. But this is where we're at. And let me explain a little bit behind this message, okay? There are two key figures in this story. We're going to look at verses 1, basically through about 13. I know it says 1 through 11, but we're going to go to 13. Nabal is the first guy. He has a wife named Abigail. Nabal means literally fool. So, look, I know there's some weird names of kids out there, but I don't know any parent that would intentionally name their child fool, because that's literally what the word means. It means, so every time somebody saw him, they're like, hey, fool, hey, fool. Nobody would name their child that intentionally. I think that this is a name that kind of he became known for. He became known as a fool, and so that became kind of his nickname or his name. Let me give you an example of it. So I'm studying, this is no lie, I'm studying this the morning of, I put the sermon together, and I'm driving home, and the Royals are playing the Cardinals. And I just happened to be driving home, and the Cardinals bring in a pitcher called Bud Norris, okay? Now, Bud is not his real name. His real name is David Norris, is his real name. But he came to the name of Bud because when he was 3 years old, and they explained this on the radio. It was like they were talking they were giving me an illustration for my sermon this morning. And they didn't know it, but they said that when he was a 3-year-old kid, that his family took him, they all went out to dinner, and they were sitting around a table, and everybody in the family ordered a Budweiser. So he had like 4 or 5 people order a Budweiser, so he's 3 years old, and when it came to him, he said, well, I'll have a Budweiser too. Well, 3-year-olds shouldn't drink Budweisers, you know what I'm saying? So the point being that, and the family got a big laugh out of the deal, so his nickname became Bud because he ordered a Bud when he was 3. So now 30 years later, because he's 33 years old, they still call him Bud. And that's actually, if you go to Baseball Reference and you type in Bud Norris, that's what comes up, Bud Norris. Now that was not the name his parents gave him, but that's a nickname based on what he did when he was 3. Well, Nabal is probably not this man's real name, but it is a name that was given to him based on how he was and how he acted. So what we're going to look at this morning is, how did this guy come to this name? How did he come to this nickname of Nabal? How did he get this name? Well, I think that we can see pretty clearly in the first 6 verses, or the first 13 verses, how he came to this name. Now, this is an interesting topic because the Bible tells us that a fool doesn't recognize that they're a fool. So the people that need this sermon this morning won't think they need it. They'll be like, man, I'm glad my kid's here because he needs it because I sure don't need it. So what I'd really like for us to walk out of here with this perspective is we can all do foolish things. We may not be a fool in the sense, but we can all do foolish things. And boy, you sure want to in your life, do you not, avoid foolish things. You want to avoid doing things that you'll look back on years later and go, man, that was foolish of me. And we want to do wise things. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, but fools despise knowledge and instruction. So I think the fact that you're here shows that you're not a fool in this, and that you want to learn. But we can all, even if we profess to be wise, we can do foolish things. So what did he do that was so foolish? Well, or how was he that made him foolish? Let's begin reading in verse 1. Then Samuel died, I'm in 1 Samuel 25, And the Israelites gathered together and lamented for him, and buried him at his home in Ramah. And David arose and went down to the wilderness of Paran. Now, this is it starts with a sad verse. Samuel has died. Who was Samuel? Remember, we spent a lot of time talking about Samuel. Samuel was the first prophet in Israel. And he was not the first prophet. He was the last prophet in Israel. And he was the one that then moved way to the kings. There was a time when the nation was ruled by prophets. Now they're ruled by kings. And remember, basically they rejected him. They said, we don't want you anymore. We don't like your kids, and we don't want you. And so we want a king that will rule amongst us. And now when he dies, it's interesting that when he dies, all Israel gathers together his funeral. When the first king dies, Saul, nobody comes to his funeral. But Samuel was a man that they realized after they got a king, he was a good guy to have. So he died. Well, David obviously can't go to the funeral. Why can't he go to the funeral? He can't go because of the tension between him and Saul. So he goes to the wilderness of Paran. Now, what happens in Paran? Verse 2, there was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel, and the man was very rich. He had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. The name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife was Abigail. And she was a woman of good understanding and beautiful appearance. But the man was harsh and evil in his doings. So here we see the first kind of thing that made this guy a fool. One, a fool doesn't realize what he has. A fool doesn't realize what he has. What did Nabal have? He was very rich. Isn't that what the text says? He was very rich. Not only that, but he had a gorgeous wife who was not just beautiful on the outside, was beautiful on the inside as well. But what is this man? How does the Bible describe him? He is harsh and evil in all his doings. Now, how in the world did this guy, who's so grouchy and so horrible to be around, end up with such a beautiful person like Abigail in his life? Well, you have to understand in Bible times, a lot of marriages were kind of prearranged. And so a father would choose for his daughter who she would marry, and they would come together on an agreement. This is probably what happened here, because you know what the name Abigail means? The light of the Father. So how can we translate that in 2018? She was Daddy's little girl. And what did Daddy's little girl want to do? And this is the thing that I think, if I can just kind of detour here a little bit. I have a daughter. I have one daughter. I have 2 sons and 1 daughter. And my daughter is not dating or married right now. But she is a great woman for all you guys in the room. But let me just tell you this. There's a side of me that is like, okay, your dad is a minister, and your dad will never be loaded. So I would really like to get a man for my daughter that would take care of her. You with me? I'm just being honest today, okay? But here's a picture of a guy who said, you know what, I love Abigail, I love this girl, and I want to make sure that she is taking care of her whole life. So basically, the way I see it is, her dad went out and picked out a rich guy with a rich family and a man of influence and a man of power, and he linked them up together. And I'm sure that as the man got older, he regretted it. Because you know what, I don't really care if my daughter dates a rich kid or not, but you know what I want my daughter to have as a husband? A man of character. A man who will work hard, a man who will be a person of his word. This is what I desire. And so this guy basically got a wife because of the fact of how much money he had, and he got a good wife and he got a good woman, but he doesn't see it that way. He is harsh. He's probably we'll see next week when we really dive in deep into this text that he doesn't speak well to her. He doesn't treat her well. He's just a jerk. He's a first-class jerk. And this is what fools do. Fools don't realize what they have. I mean, my man is living the dream, isn't he? He never has to worry about money, and he has an amazing wife. And yet, what is he? He's grouchy, he's harsh, he's evil, he's difficult to be around, he treats people poorly, and this is a fool. It is so easy in our culture and in our lives to notice what we do not have rather than what we have. We just, especially in an American culture. And this makes us foolish. Rejoice in what you have rather than what you don't have. Or don't moan for or long for something that you don't have because you don't have it. Rejoice in what you have. Jesus tried to emphasize this when he says, look, when you go, remember the disciples, they went out and they cast out demons and they did all these miracles and they came running back to Jesus and they were rejoicing in the fact that they told demons what to do and they healed people that were sick. And Jesus, remember what he said? Don't rejoice that you could do this, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. So bring your expectations down. And what happens is we can become so driven and we desire so much that we oftentimes miss what we have. And this is what made the man a fool. He's not happy at all. He's miserable because 3,000 sheep's not enough, and 1,000 goats are not enough, and a beautiful wife is not enough, and a wife that's beautiful on the inside is not enough. He wants more, 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 and more. And this is how fools are. So a fool doesn't realize what he has. Now, it's interesting, a little line that it throws in at the end of verse 2. That line at the end of verse 2 says this: he was of the house of Caleb. Now, that's an important line, okay? Because who was Caleb? Caleb was the equal to Joshua and Caleb. Those names ring a bell? Okay? So when the Israelites left Egypt and they got to the edge of the promised land, when they got to the edge of it, they said, let's go in and check out the land before we actually go in there. So they sent in 12 spies. And 2 of those spies were Joshua and Caleb. Caleb and Joshua came back with a positive report. The other 10 said, oh man, we can't take them. They're all Shaquille O'Neal in there. We're not. We're little midgets compared to them. We're minuscule compared to them. We can't take them. But Joshua and Caleb said, look, we got God on our side, and so we can take them. And what happened? Basically, because of their positive report, 10 of the 12 spies did not ever go into the land. And in fact, anybody that was over the age of 21 at this particular time died in the wilderness. You had a bunch of young people, and then you had the old guys, which 2 old guys were Joshua and Caleb that actually went into the land of promise. So this man, Nabal is from that line. He is from a line of faith. He is from a line of believing in God, of character, of being good to others. So this is his line. And so I think it throws it in there to say, this is the line this guy's from. Because let me tell you the second thing a fool does. 1 is a fool doesn't realize what he has. 2, a fool hurts his family name. A fool hurts his family name. There's a lot of verses about this in Proverbs. Proverbs 15:20. A wise son makes a father glad, but a foolish man despises his mother. Proverbs 17:21. He who begets a scoffer does so to his sorrow, and the father of a fool has no joy. Pretty powerful verse, isn't it? Proverbs 17:25. A foolish son is a grief to his father, and bitterness to her who bore him. a fool hurts his family. And he doesn't just hurt his family in their reputation, but he also hurts his family in his actions, in how he acts, and in the emotional turmoil that he brings to his parents. I imagine that Nabal's parents were disappointed in Nabal and the man that he had become. I hate to break it to all of you that have little children. When your kids graduate and get out of the house, you don't do this. I probably think more about my children today. I pray more for my kids today. I intercede to God more for them today than when they were 2. I care deeply about them. I want them to grow up and be people of character, and I want them to grow up and be godly people, and I want them to grow up and be people that love the Lord. And so it becomes of great concern to me how they are. And I think we can all relate, can't those of you that have adult children? You know, I think that we can oftentimes we can swing the pendulum too much sometimes in life. But you know, you should really care in a lot of ways what your parents think. Like my father moved to Topeka in 1972 when I was 3 years old. My father developed a reputation in this town. And a good reputation. A reputation as a man that loves people and cares about people and do anything for you, and a giving man. I feel a responsibility to carry on my father's name. I don't want to hurt my father's name. I want my mom to sleep well at night thinking about her son. Not like, oh Lord, what is Mark getting into now? But see, a fool doesn't care. A fool just says, it's my life, I'll live it how I want to live it. But a man that is wise cares deeply about what his parents think. And whether or not I am personally enhancing the reputation of my father's name. I care about carrying on my father's name. And I think we all should, right? But Nabal doesn't. I'm sorry, I keep saying Nabal, Nabal, because I've been wrestling with it all week. So do you know this? We're talking about the same guy, even though I'm pronouncing it wrong the entire time. So all of you English people are going to hate me by the end of this service. But Nabal is his correct name. But if we just add another L to the end of his name there, then I could say Nabal, but Nabal is his name. So let's read on, verse number 4. When David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep, David sent 10 young men, and David said to the young men, go up to Carmel, go to Nabal and greet him in my name. And thus you shall say to him who lives in prosperity, peace be to you, peace to your house, and peace to all that you have. Now I have heard that you have shearers, your shepherds were here with us, and we did not hurt them, nor is there anything missing from all the while they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore, let my young men find favor in your eyes, for we come on a feast day. Please give whatever comes to your hand to your servant and to your son David. Okay, so what's happening here is that it's sheep shearing time, and he is a guy that has a lot of sheep, 3,000 of them, right? So he brings them to be sheared. I got to be careful about all these S's. So he brings them to be sheared, and so what does David do? David basically has a soft spot for shepherds, wouldn't you think? And sheep, because he was one, or he is one. So he knows how vulnerable these people are. He knows how vulnerable they can be. The sheep can't defend themselves. The shepherds are usually not armed. And he knows from his own experience that wild animals can come and can devour sheep. And he knows that robbers can come and steal from the shepherds. So what David does is David kind of becomes the security force for these shepherds and their sheep. And what he does is this is a lot of sheep, and these are multitude of shepherds, but he does a great job protecting them. In fact, they don't lose anything. None of the sheep die, and nobody gets robbed, and David and his men do a good job. So Nabal doesn't compensate him. He just kind of uses them. So David sends 10 guys to just kind of be like, hey, we just wanted to let you know that we did this for you. And this wasn't David being presumptuous. This is David just saying, look, we'd love some food or something. As a payment, as a repayment, for watching your sheep, for taking care of your sheep and your shepherds. So he kind of sends, it's kind of like he throws it out there. And, it's like one thing my father-in-law taught me years ago, and I've never forgot. He goes, you can't get anything if you don't at least ask for it. So there's nothing wrong with just asking. And that's, I think, in a sense, is what he's doing. He's kind of saying, look, just ask. Just go there and tell them what we've done. If they give us anything, then great. If not, well, we were a good neighbor. Okay? Now, we're going to see in the text that it doesn't go well. And it doesn't go well not because that they don't give him anything, but because he insults David. And David, we're going to see next week, frankly, he loses his mind. And he gets in the flesh, and he wants to do something very terrible that Abigail saves him from. But he doesn't, he's just kind of throwing it out there. He's just kind of saying, look, this is what we've done for you. If you want to help us out, great. If not, great. But this is what we've done. Okay? But we're going to see that Nabal doesn't do anything for them. So number 3, a fool doesn't appreciate what others do for him. A fool doesn't appreciate what others do for him. Fools are incredibly selfish. All a fool thinks about is himself. She doesn't think about what others have done for them. And this is the reality. We all have people in our lives that are helping us. So the wise person understands that, look, there are people that are doing things for me. They're not getting paid for this. They're doing it out of the kindness of their heart. They're doing it out of love for others. And what fools do is they abuse people like that. Wise person kind of picks their head up and realizes, man, I got a lot of people doing a lot of stuff for me. I should be grateful. You know what I think Christians should be? They should be defined by their gratitude. Somebody holds the door open for you and you walk in, you should look at that person and say, thank you. They didn't have to do that for you. They chose to do that for you. And that's just a small thing, much less bigger things in our life. But what happens is foolish people don't appreciate what others do. You ever held the door open for somebody and it's like you were supposed to? That happened to me on Friday, Friday actually. I held the door open and this guy walked by and he looked at me like, good job, door boy. He didn't say that. That's how I interpreted it. I wanted to do the old, shut it half one. Ha ha ha! But I'm sure you all have never gotten in the flesh like that. Never, right? I gotta move on. I'm out of time. All right, verse 8. So the fourth thing we found in verse number 8, a fool is greedy and selfish. A fool is greedy and selfish. Very rarely in the New Testament did Jesus use the word fool. He just didn't use that word a lot. Now, if you read Proverbs and you read the Old Testament, the word fool is everywhere. It's all over the place. But when you get to the New Testament, It's very rare, and it's really rare out of the mouth of Jesus. But Jesus did use the word fool once in describing a man who, remember, he had a guy come to him. This is found in Luke chapter 12. He had a guy come to him, and this guy said, hey, would you tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me? So he had a guy come and say, Jesus, my brother's not sharing my father's inheritance. Would you tell him to do that? And Jesus said this, man, who made me a judge or an arbitrator over you? He says, and then he said in verse 15, take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses. And then he told a story about there was the ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, what shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops? So he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns, and I will build greater. And there I will store all my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be which you have provided? So is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. This is not an anti-money sermon, okay? But I will tell you this, just as we can, like I described, the pendulum swinging too far, we should be good stewards with our money. Does the Bible not say, go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways? You ought to store money for a time where there's going to be a downtime. But we are definitely not called to hoard. God gave you money so that you can help others, so that you can be a blessing to others. And what happens to fools is they say, this money's mine. It's all mine. It's all about me. And they're greedy and selfish with their money. And this is Nabal. He's got a guy who is bending over backwards for him. And he's like, he's not getting a dime out of me. He's the guy at the restaurant that is only going to give the waitress 10% on the penny. I ain't rounding up no 2 cents. They don't deserve it. You're squeezing that penny so hard that Lincoln is screaming, right? It is penny, you're taking it to another level. This is Nabal. Nabal is all about Nabal and Nabal's bank account and how much money Nabal has and how many sheep he has and how many goats he has. And he's just greedy and selfish. And nobody remembers a fool. They just fight over your money when you're gone. Who do we remember? We remember those who sacrificed, right? Isn't that what this weekend is about? Who moves us to tears? The hoarder or the 20-year-old kid that went to the middle of nowhere and fought for our freedom and gave his life? Those are the people that move us, right? But a fool is greedy and selfish. Number 5, a fool uses his mouth to lie and insult. A fool uses his mouth to lie and insult. So this is what happens. So they come and they say, hey, could you please help us out a little bit? We're hungry, man. There's 600 of us. You know how much food it takes to feed 600 people? Just bare minimum. That's a lot. So he's just saying, look, we've been kind of doing this for you, a little down on our funds right now. Could you kind of help us out? We've not been beggars. We've actually helped you, assisted you. So let's see how he responds. Let's see if this is going to go well, because it's not been good so far. Maybe it'll turn here. Maybe he'll have a moment. You're like, I know it's not going to be that way because of the sermon, Mark. All right. So what does he say? So he says this. So when the young men came, they spoke to Nabal according to all these words in the name of David, and they waited. So they tell him, and then they wait. And what's happening here is he's sitting there and he's mulling it over in his head. What am I going to say to these guys? This is what he says. Then he answered David's servants and said, who is David and who is this son of Jesse? Oh boy, it's going south fast. Because remember, isn't that what Saul would call David? The son of Jesse? Who is David and who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants nowadays who break away each from his master. Shall I then take my bread and my water and my meat that I have killed for my shearers and give it to men whom I do not know where they are from? Now, I love this because it says in verse 12, so David's young men turned on their heels and went back. Now, that's funny to me because it means that they heard him say it and then they're like, is that your final answer? And then they just turned and went right back to David. Fools use their mouths to lie and insult. There is great power, is there not, in the tongue? And just because something is in your head doesn't mean it ought to come out of your mouth. Right? So what happens is he's probably thinking this, but he shouldn't say it. He should probably take the high road and say, look, he maybe doesn't like David and he doesn't like how things are going, but he's like, look, David has done me a service, so I'll give you, but he doesn't say that. He says what's in his head. Now, the Bible has a lot to say about this. Proverbs 17:28. Even a fool is counted wise when he holds his peace, when he shuts his lips, for he is considered perceptive. You know, was it Lincoln who said that he talked about how that I would rather keep my mouth shut than open it and people think me a fool than to open it and remove all doubt? Proverbs 14:7. Go from the presence of a foolish man when you do not perceive in him the lips of knowledge. And that's exactly what David's men did. When they hear him talking, they're like, we out of here. Because we're getting nowhere with this fool. Proverbs 18:6. A fool's lips enter into contention, and his mouth calls for blows. A fool's mouth is his destruction, and his lips are the snares of his soul. Proverbs 19:1. Better is the poor who walks in his integrity than one who is perverse in his lips and is a fool. Ecclesiastes 10:11 says, the serpent may bite when it is not charmed. The babbler is no different. The words of a wise man's mouth are gracious, but the lips of a fool shall swallow him up. The words of his mouth begin with foolishness, and the end of his talking is raving madness. So fools can't control their mouth. And that's Nabal. He can't control his mouth. He says what comes to his mind. This is how he got the nickname. Number 6. A fool thinks he alone is the reason for his success. Listen to how many personal pronouns he uses in verse number 11. Shall I take my bread and my water and what, church? My meat that I have killed for my shears? Is this guy conceited or what? It's all about him. Years ago, I had somebody tell me, stop and think how often you use the word I in your conversations, because it reveals what's in your heart. And man, I am a selfish cat, because I use that word a lot. I, me, my, mine. And that's Nabal. He is a selfish man. And he thinks that he alone is the reason for his success. There is nobody in this room that got to where you got on your own. Somebody helped you. And I would advocate this. There's nobody in this room that can get to heaven without Christ's help. And that's why the Bible says that our righteousness is as filthy rags, that we can't earn our salvation. We couldn't earn it if we tried. And so what happens is Christians should be a very humble people because we realize that our success with God comes not through our efforts, but through the work of Jesus Christ. But what happens is fools think, and you know you're talking to a fool when you ask them, hey man, how do you think you're going to get to heaven? What do you think is going to happen when you die? And they say, well, I'm going to go to heaven. Well, how do you know you're going to go to heaven? Well, I've been good down here. That's foolish talk. A wise person says, man, I've tried to be good and I can't do it. I've tried to be right. You ever tried to just do the right thing every day for a week? Are you all with me this morning? By 9:30, you're like, I'll try again tomorrow. Right? Because we can't earn our own righteousness. We can't. Proverbs 14:16. A wise man fears and departs from evil, but a fool rages and is self-confident. Proverbs 28:26. He who trusts in his own heart. That's an important word. He who trusts in his own heart is a fool. But whoever walks wisely will be delivered. There's a lot in here for us, isn't there? And I don't want to be a fool. I don't want to die a fool. I want to die wise. But we can learn a lot from him. Let's step back and realize what we have. Let's care about our family name and our reputation. You say, I grew up in a horrible family. Well, then you start a new reputation. You start a new line. Let's appreciate what others do for us. Let's not be greedy and selfish. Let's be generous. Let's be known for our generosity. Let's not use our mouths to lie and insult. Let's not be that way. Let's use our mouths to encourage and uplift and motivate and challenge and push. And let's never, ever get to the point where we think, man, I am who I am because I am the man. No, I am who I am because a whole lot of people, I stood on the shoulders of a whole lot of people, and a whole lot of people pushed me. And that's where I am. I am because somebody made sacrifices. I am who I am. Nabal was rich. Yeah, he was probably shrewd. But I bet he started with a lot. I bet his daddy made some great sacrifices to give him what he had. Let's not forget where we came from and where we're going and who makes that possible. All right? All right, let's go to the Lord in prayer. This is a chance. This is your chance to respond to how God spoke to you today. So if God spoke to you today, I'd like for you to do some business with Him. Does your life, does it characterize one of wisdom or foolishness? Would you just spend a minute talking to the Lord? Father, I thank you for this time we've had today. I thank you for all those who came out this morning. Grateful, Lord, for your word and the power of it. Lord, I pray that we as Christians would be defined by wisdom, that we would not be fools, that we would not be fools in our mouth, with our money, that we would be generous, that we would be kind, and most of all, that we would not be fools in how we view eternity. And thinking that we can actually earn the favor of God, that we can actually appease God by our righteousness. So I pray if there's anybody here today that has never trusted Christ, they've never acknowledged their own sinfulness, and they put their faith in Christ, they would not leave today until they take care of that issue. So thank you, Lord, for your word, and thank you for this story, and thank you for telling us about this guy so that we can learn from him. Bless us as we leave. Help us to be wise and safe and good citizens. Make a difference in our community in a positive way as we leave here today. We pray this all in Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you again for listening to our series on 1 Samuel with Pastor Mark Dawes. If you have questions about today's message, please contact our church office at info@topekabaptist.org. Give us a call at 785-862-0988 or check us out online at www.topekabaptist.org.